sitting alone in Vrindavan writing, my godbrother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it without accepting the renounced order of life. Nobody can become a preacher. So he insisted, not he insisted, practically my spiritual master insisted. He wanted me to become a preacher, so he forced me through back toward this godbrother. You accept so unwillingly, accept it. Srila Prabhupada. The passenger cars behind the locomotive moved forward, almost silently, thumping at a slow rhythm over the tracks. The train pulled out of the station, past freight yards, a neighborhood run down tenements, the old Delhi fort, the garbage dump at Nizamuddin with its hundreds of crows, vultures flying overhead, and then a past marble doomed red sandstone mosque. Seated in a third-class compartment, his luggage stored beneath his seat, Abe could see factory workers walking near the tracks, carrying their lunches in metal tiffins. And then the factories, surrounded by huts of mud and straw. He passed thatched roofs, trampolines, tents, the cow dung fires that smoked in the morning air, the tall stacks of Enterprise electrical powerhouse spewed out a different smoke, and a sooty black cloud poured for the locomotive. He saw red-violet wildflowers blooming from bramble bushes at the trackside, and beyond he saw the roads of Atura with its border of fruitless kikar trees. In the morning,
Thank you. It was the morning train to Agra, and there were few passengers. A boy would be riding as far as Mathura, and then traveling by Tunga to Vrindavan. He had ridden widely the Indian Railway, especially in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, when he had traveled on business in Bengal, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Andhra Pradesh. He had been to Vrindavan several times. In his childhood reveries over the train timetables, it had been the first place he had thought of visiting. His first visit in 1925 had been but a brief pilgrimage while he had been in nearby Agra on business. Then in 1932, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had been in Vrindavan on parikrama. That had been a memorable visit. A boy had heard him speak at Koshi, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had marked him. He likes to hear. And then at Radhakund 3 years later, he had been with the spiritual master again. But he had never gone like this to live there, dressed in a simple white dhoti, his hand in a bead bag, fingering his japa beads. He looked out the window, quietly chanting the holy name. Thank you. Usha?
The train passed through the dense thickets of Faridabad and into the agriculture field, with their interspersed patches of wheat, dal, and sugarcane, beginning at trackside and stretching for half a mile to the dry, uncultivated land that continued as far as the eye could see. The train sped faster. Rural villages drifted past the window. An hour out of Delhi, the land was mostly flat and open, dotted with small villages. Occasionally, he would glimpse a striking old temple, but mostly it was the land, now barren with a few palm trees, now cultivated with irrigated fields under the expanse of blue sky and blazing sun. For a long time, Abhay had wanted to take shelter in Vrindavan, and now there was no obstacle. His purpose remained the same. He would write back to Godhead and deliver it to the printer in Delhi fortnightly. As long as he could afford to travel, he would return to Delhi to distribute back to Godhead. But he would live in the shelter of Vrindavan. He had in mind the room at the Vamsi Gopalji temple near Keshi Ghat, a rooftop room that commanded a view of almost all of Vrindavan And since his 1953 visit from Jhansi, he had kept in touch with the temple manager.
Thank you.
In moving to Vrindavan, Abhay was following his predecessor spiritual masters, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktivinoda Thakura, had their house at Radhakunda and had preached in Vrindavan. Gaurav Kishora Das Babaji, Jagannath Das Babaji, Vishwanath Chakravarti, and Narottam Das Thakura had lived either in Vrindavan or in Navadvipa near the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya and his immediate followers had an especially intimate relationship with Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya had commissioned Rupa Sanatana Goswami places of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan that over the centuries had become lost. Rupa and Sanatana had left their prestigious government posts and gone to live in Vrindavan, dressed in simple loincloths. They had lived without fixed residence, staying each night under a different tree. They and Jiva Goswami, Raghunath Dasa Goswami, Raghunatha Bhatta Goswami, and Gopal Bhatta Goswami, known and worshipped as the six Goswamis of Vrindavan, had compiled a voluminous literature of Krishna Bhakti. They had inspired wealthy Vaishnava patrons to erect Vrindavan's great temples, Govindaji, Madana Mohana, Radha Damodar, Radha Ramana, at Radhakunda. Shortly after Lord Chaitanya's departure from the world, Raghunath Dasa Goswami had chanted 100,000 names of Krishna and discoursed for several hours daily on the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. There also, Krishnadas Kaviraj had compiled the Chaitanya Charitamrita, describing the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya.
Thank you.
Even those Gaudiya Vaishnavas who did not live in Vrindavana kept Vrindavana always in their hearts and proclaimed its glories. The Chaitanya Charitamrita describes the great ecstasy Lord Chaitanya felt while traveling from Puri to Vrindavan. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind was absorbed in ecstatic love at Jagannatha Puri, but when he passed along the road on the way to Vrindavan, that love increased 100 times. The Lord's ecstatic love increased 1,000 times when he visited Mathura, but it increased 100,000 times when he wandered in the forests of Vrindavan. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was elsewhere, the very name of Vrindavan was sufficient to increase his ecstatic love. Now, when he was actually traveling in the Vrindavan forest, his mind was absorbed in great ecstatic love day and night. He ate and bathed simply out of habit. Vrindavan is the earthly manifestation of Lord Krishna's eternal spiritual abode, which the Lord himself describes in Bhagavad Gita. There is another nature which is eternal and is transcendental to manifested and unmanifested matter. It is never annihilated. It is the supreme destination. When one goes there, he never comes back. That is my supreme abode. Krishna's activities of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, and his abode, Goloka Vrindavan, are described in many Vedic literatures. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is attending the cows, yielding all desires, in abodes built with spiritual gems, where he is surrounded by millions of purple trees and always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds and hundreds or gopis.
Thank you. Krishna's abode, Goloka Vrindavan, is far beyond the material world. When Krishna comes to earth, he displays his eternal abode in the Vrindavana of India. That 84 square mile tract in North India is identical with the eternal world in the spiritual sky. To live and die in Vrindavana guarantees the devotee transfer to the eternal spiritual world. The residents of Vrindavana, even the animals, are exalted. At the end of life, they will transfer to Goloka Vrindavana. Lord Brahma, therefore, prayed that he might take birth as a clump of grass on the outskirts
of Vrindavan, so that these pure devotees will purify him with the dust from their feet. And Vaishnava Shastras declare that even by only a brief visit to Vrindavana, one can realize the Supreme Lord in his heart. Alison, please.
It's like the transit of the body of the Lord. Krishna Gokola is all-pervading, infinite, and supreme. It expands both and below, over any restriction that abode and manifested within this material world by with the will of Lord Krishna. It is identical to that the original Gokola. They are not with two different bodies. The land there is a touchstone, Sindhamani, and the forest abode with desired trees. Although material eyes see it as an ordinary place, the ideal place to execute Krishna consciousness is Rajabhuma or Vrinavana, where people are naturally inclined to love Krishna. Krishna is naturally inclined to love them. The train arrived at Mathura. Abhay stepped down with his luggage. I looked around, nothing. The recently constructed Mathura Junction building. Proceeding to the gate out of the station, he found a Tunga driver, agreed on the fare, and started for Kisigata for half a mile, the Wobbling Horse Railway Yard. At the main road, they turned left past under the railroad bridge and entered an open market. Piles of fruit and grains were displayed on the ground. There are vendors beside them bartering, measuring while consumers miled about.
Thank you.
Dressed in brightly colored saris, yellows, greens, pinks, and purple, moved busily in the market. The vehicle traffic consisted mostly of bullock carts, the drivers often squatting on the wooden yokes between the shoulders of their animals, whipping alternatively one ox and then the other with a length of rope joined to a wooden handle. Although this was the most populated area in the trip to Vrindavan, compared to Delhi, it seemed simple and rural. The sun was high, but the Tunga's top provided a partial shelter, and the summer's heat had passed. Beyond the bazaar, the road curved to the right, and a boy saw the nearby white domes of the massive sandstone mosque marking Krishna Janmasthana, the birthplace of Lord Krishna. Centuries ago, invading Muslims had destroyed the large Krishna temple and created a mosque in its stead. And now, directly in front of the mosque, stood a newer, smaller Krishna temple. They approached the three-way junction, New Delhi, Central Mathura, Vrindavan. The driver struck the horse with his whip, and the Tunga proceeded along the Vrindavan road, edging through the herd of white cows, the herdsman walking amongst them, carrying his stick. The road was busy with Tungas and slow-creaking ox carts, loaded with market commodities and pulled by squat black water buffalo, a string of small spindle-legged donkeys carrying oversized loads of firewood and sandbags.
Thank you. Usha?
Much had changed in Abhay's life since he had come here to see his spiritual master during the parikrama years ago. Vrindavan had remained the same. He felt he had done the best thing in coming here, leaving the heat, the traffic and fumes, the human passion of Delhi. It was a natural relief, yet even as he felt transcendental emotions for Vrindavan. Impressions of his months of preaching in Delhi lingered in his mind. The city streets and himself going from place to place with his back to Godheads. Life in Delhi had been constant, vigorous preaching, had been constant, vigorous preaching. Now he was more than 60 years old, but he was not coming to Vrindavan to retire. He had retired from the household responsibilities, but not from his responsibilities of making Back to Godhead as popular and sophisticated illustrated weekly. He would live in Vrindavan and commute to Delhi, but he would never stop preaching. A sight of taller trees signaled the precinct, precinct of Vrindavan as the thin horse trotted along past the police station and water true for animals. On either side appeared the garden courtyard of private state of ashram, fragile and ashrams, fragile white malati flowers, golden marigold, frangipani trees, and red hibiscus, trees of sorrow, and many other flowers and trees, some known only in Vrindavan, bloom forth in the brilliant sunlight. The Radha Govind temple loomed four streaks light on his left, and opposite in the distance the high rising tower of Ranganatha temple. They entered narrow streets, tighter and busier places with market and city dwelling, and then it became quieter again. At the end of the narrow street, by the Yamuna river, near the Keshivad bathing ghat, stood the smallest and beautiful ornate entrance of the Vamshi Gopalji temple, a narrow three-storied building with three domes and many decorated arches.
Thank you.
After stepping over the curbside drain and walking up three marble steps, Abhay entered the front door, the driver following him, carrying the luggage. Once inside, Abhay removed his shoes and entered the courtyard, which was open to the sky through a metal grate, on which a few birds sat 2 floors above. A column of sunlight lit one side of the courtyard, where a potted tulsi sat atop a pillar. The temple seemed cool and quiet. Adjacent to the courtyard was the deity room, its doors locked shut. Overhead was a mezzanine with rooms whose entrances were visible from the courtyard. A few saris and strips of cloth hung on improvised clotheslines. Mahant Gopal, the temple pujari, whom Abhay had known since 1954, greeted him cheerfully. He was about the same age as Abhay and had long grey hair and an unruly beard. Although Abhay's attire was modest, he appeared well dressed compared with Gopal, who wore only a coarse dhoti. Gopal,
Thank you.
Gopal led Abai upstairs. Coming out onto the roof, Abai smiled to see again the wonderful vista. Barely 100 yards away, he could see the Yamuna, not only the immediate patch of water flowing before him, but to his left and right a broad curving sheet of river shimmering in the afternoon sun. There were sand deltas, herds of cows and buffalo grazing, the flat grassy banks of the Yamuna, and plains and trees as far as the eye could see. And in the opposite direction was the town of Vrindavan, marked by dozens of temples, spires, and domes. Abai's room, the only one on the roof, was small, with narrow double doors and barred windows. Sitting on the apartment's roof, monkeys with their tiny offspring sat watching unalarmed. Just outside the door, a 2 foot high cement pyramid signified that the temple deity was directly beneath. Abai entered the room. Through the barred windows, he could see the palace at Keshigat, the venerable tower of the Gopinath temple, and beyond the uninterrupted flat river, the green banks, and the sky.
Thank you. A boy with the details of the room, the small kerosene burner, the rope and bucket for drawing bath water from the well to the roof. Gopal meticulously produced a government-stamped rental agreement. A boy wrote a short paragraph, declaring himself a disciple of the late Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada, and attesting to his renting the room at 5 rupees per month, both parties signed. After his bath, a boy took prasadam and rested. When he heard the bells ringing in In the temple below, he went down to see the deities. Gopal, who had been the temple's pujari for many years and had seen its reconstruction in 1923, had told a boy that the temple deity, Vamsi Gopalaji, had been installed 350 years before by Mahan Prahlada Dasa of the Nimbarka Vaishnava Sampradaya. Gopal himself had installed the deity of Radharani, Vamsi Gopalaji, standing in a graceful threefold bending form and holding his flute. It was very appealing. He was 3 feet tall and of black marble. Radharani, slightly shorter, was of brass. They were simply dressed in rough white cotton and illuminated by the dim glow of a kerosene lamp. A boy could see that they were being cared for, but because of poverty there was no opulence. Alice, please.
As the sun was setting over the town of Vrindavana, having the entire roof, having the entire roof's walkway to himself, Abhay walked and chanted japa, enjoying this cooling, early evening breeze from the Yamuna. Occasionally, a solitary boat would pass on the calm rivers of the Yamuna, and a devotee somewhere unseen could be heard chanting the evening prayers of Keshagata. He felt pleased with this location in the heart of the pastimes of Lord Krishna. He was not a newcomer spending his first day in a strange town. Everything here was already familiar and dear. As Vrindavana was Krishna's abode, Abhay was Krishna's servant of the six Goswamis, the servant of his spiritual master felt at home. As the, as the day turned to twilight, temple bells rang throughout the town. Abhay walked to the western side of the roof, and looked into the city. Thousands of temples, Govindaji Temple and the Radhav Temple, and thousands of smaller temples were having their Sandhya Arti and Kirtana, glorifying Lord Krishna.
Thank you.
Aboy responded to the sights and sounds of Vrindavan as only a pure devotee could. His thoughts and emotions were full of appreciation and awareness of Krishna, Krishna's devotees, and Krishna's land. Naturally, he began to think of preaching, hankering for others to know the intimate peace and ecstasy of Vrindavan. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was inviting all souls to join him in his eternal abode. Yet even in India, few understood. And outside India, people knew nothing of Vrindavan or of the Jamuna or of what it means to be free of material desires. Why shouldn't people all over the world have this? This was the abode of peace, yet no one knew anything of it, nor were people interested. But this is what they were actually hankering for. The boy thought of back to Godhead and how, by Krishna's grace, he might expand his preaching beyond India to the whole world. His god brothers, it would have been better if they had all worked together in Gaudiya Math, but many of them were at least keeping the regulated principles. None of them, however, seemed to be doing much beyond maintaining a temple here, an ashram there, worshipping a deity, eating and sleeping. But there was so much more to be done in broadcasting the glories of Vrindavan. Aboy chanted and thought of Krishna. Gradually he turned to the task of producing the October issue of Back to Godhead, due to be printed shortly in Delhi. He had a deadline to keep.
Thank you. Usha?
Morning before sunrise, the residents of Vrindavan were astir bathing in Yamuna. Before performing puja to their deities, reciting mantras. But Abhay was awake even before most, writing in stillness beneath the light in his rooftop room. As he wrote diligently in English, scriptural references appeared and took their place within convincing arguments. For hours he wrote, page after page, in an exercise book, until gradually the chirping of awakening birds signaled the end of the dark night's stillness. Soon the sun would rise. Keeping to his regular schedule, he put aside his writing and began chanting japa, staying in his room uttering the Hare Krishna mantra. in a soft, deep voice. Even before the first traces of light in the sky, before the river was visible, a few Babajis reciting prayers made their way through the streets, heading for the Yamuna. By 4 a.m., gongs and temples bell throughout the city heralded and the Mangala Arti of the deity. Abhay continued chanting alone for another hour. Then he appeared to bathe, lowering the bucket on its long rope and howling water up to the rooftop.
Thank you. Pravalin?
It was light when he went out, his bead bag around his neck, a few copies of Back to Godhead in his hand. Turning right at the temple door, he walked the tight, crooked lane, past alleys, dirt paths, and cross lanes, which interlaced in a winding network. There were no shops in the area, only silent buildings, many of them hundreds of years old. The neighborhood was serene. Behind closed shutters, someone played on wooden clackers and sang Hare Krishna softly. At a crossroads where dark women filled brass water pots from a well, Abhay turned left onto a street lined with small, open porches. On either side he saw ornate temple architecture, one entrance marked by two stone lions, another by a carved elephant with teeth like a tiger's. A brick and mortar wall was crumbling with age. Soon Abhay arrived at the Radharaman temple, established almost 500 years before by Gopala Bhatta one of Lord Chaitanya's chief followers. Here, residents of Vrindavan were coming and going according to their vows, following a strict schedule that allowed not a moment's delay, making their daily visit to various temples. Abhay entered and stood amidst a group of worshippers, viewing the deity of Krishna, Radharamana. The deity, wearing a fresh garland of flowers, his enchanting black form adorned with bright silks and jewels, appeared very opulent.
Thank you. Victoria?
Knowing the priests of Radharamana to be respected, learned Sanskritists, some of whom also read English, Abai had brought with him a few copies of Back to Godhead. He met Vishwambhara Goswami, a young priest in his 30s who, after the death of his father, had left his law practice and taken over some of the temple management. The temple was run under a caste Goswami system, and thus for 500 years, Vishwambhara's ancestors had handed down charge of the temple. Although Vishwambhara had met many sadhus, he was immediately struck by Abai's gentle and humble demeanor. He accepted the copies of Back to Godhead and sat and talked with Abai. Abai then continued along Vrindavana's winding lanes to visit another temple, Radha Damodara. He passed old Babajis and women carrying water and commercial shop beside an open porch where people worshipped a Shiva Linga. Monkeys sitting atop a high concrete wall and ranging from roof to roof, ledge to ledge, chattered and gestured as Abai walked beneath. As the morning progressed, barefoot children had begun to appear more frequently playing within the open doorways. As he walked along chanting japa, his right hand in his bead bag, his lips moving softly, hardly anyone in Vrindavana knew him. But as an elderly, cultured Bengali gentleman, he did not seem an unusual sight. He was a religious babu in a town devoted entirely to religion.
Thank you.
Abhay would regularly visit Vrindavan's important temples, and afterwards he would shop, returning to his room about around 11 with vegetables for cooking, using a kerosene burner and a 3-tired cooker. He would cook rice, potatoes, and sometimes sabji. He would also cook chapatis, and he would take only one meal a day at noon. In the evening, a cup of milk. He would not have time to cook. He would take the prasadam, the didi, after lunch. He would nap for about 15 minutes and then write. He rarely received visitors, but stayed alone writing.
Thank you. We can finish here. It's now 8 o'clock.